Part 1, The Invasion. The massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were dark, angular vessels that looked like floating cities made of metal and strange glowing crystals. There were 12 of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships simply appeared one morning, blocking out the sun in several major cities across the planet. Captain Jiho Park stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiance, humanity's first deep space warship. It was barely 2 years old. Built from the dreams of scientists who believed humans would one day explore the stars, now it faced an enemy no one had prepared for. Jiho gripped the railing as he stared at the view screen showing the alien fleet. His crew was silent, waiting for orders that he didn't know how to give. The aliens called themselves the Valkyrie. They made contact through every communication device on Earth simultaneously. Televisions, radios, phones, computers, everything displayed the same image. A tall creature with 4 arms and silver skin stood before what looked like a council of other alien species. Its voice was cold and mechanical, translated perfectly into every human language. The message was simple. Earth had 24 hours to surrender completely. All weapons must be destroyed. All governments must submit to Valkyrie rule. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of human civilization. The broadcast ended with images of other planets reduced to burning wastelands. This was what happened to species that refused to obey. Dr. Minji Kwan watched the broadcast from the United Defense Council headquarters deep beneath Geneva. She was the lead astrophysicist, brought in to advise world leaders on the threat from space. Around the conference table sat presidents, prime ministers, and military commanders from every major nation. They argued loudly in a dozen different languages, but the translation devices made every word clear. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded they fight. A few suggested trying to negotiate. Minji listened to them all, her mind racing through calculations. She had studied the alien ships with every telescope and sensor humanity possessed. The technology was centuries ahead of Earth's best efforts. The energy readings alone suggested weapons that could crack continents. Colonel Taeyang Kim sat in a different kind of room. He was deep in a bunker beneath the ruins of what used to be a military testing facility. Around him were soldiers from 20 different countries, the best special forces operators Earth had to offer. They had been training together for 3 years, preparing for threats that might come from space. Now that threat had arrived and they looked to him for leadership. Taeyang was calm as he addressed his team. He had fought in 3 wars before the age of 35. He understood combat in ways that politicians never would. He looked at the faces around him, men and women from every corner of Earth, and he told them the truth. They were going to fight. Surrender was not in his vocabulary, and he would make sure it wasn't in theirs either. The 24 hours passed in chaos. The United Nations held an emergency session. Protests erupted in major cities, with some people demanding surrender while others called for resistance. Religious leaders offered prayers. Scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology. Military forces around the world mobilized, even though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless. When the deadline expired, Captain Jiho received the order he had been dreading. The Defense Council had voted. Earth would not surrender. He was to engage the enemy fleet and buy time for evacuation of major cities. It was a suicide mission dressed up in diplomatic language, and everyone on his bridge knew it. The Valkyrie response was immediate. 3 of their ships broke formation and moved toward Earth's major space stations. Jiho watched as energy beams, bright blue and impossibly focused, lanced out from the alien vessels. The International Space Station vanished in a flash of light. The Chinese station lasted a few seconds longer before it too was destroyed. Humanity's achievements in space were erased in minutes. Then the alien ships fired on the satellites. Communications satellites, weather satellites, GPS networks, all of them turned to debris. The Valkyrie wanted humanity blind and isolated. They wanted fear to do half their work before they even landed troops. Jiho gave the order to attack. The Defiance and 6 smaller military spacecraft accelerated toward the alien fleet. They fired missiles, railgun rounds, and laser weapons. Some of the projectiles actually reached the Valkyrie ships, but they simply bounced off shimmering energy shields. The aliens didn't even bother to return fire at first, as if humanity's weapons were beneath their notice. That changed when one of Earth's ships, the Beijing's Pride, rammed directly into a Valkyrie vessel at full speed. The suicide run managed to overwhelm the shield for just a moment, and the smaller human ship punched a hole into the alien hull before exploding. It was the first damage humanity had inflicted, and it cost 200 lives. The Valkyrie fleet stopped ignoring Earth's forces after that. Energy beams cut through 3 human ships in seconds. Jiho barely managed to escape with the Defiance retreating behind the moon as his ship sparked and smoked from near misses. Half his crew was dead. The rest were wounded or in shock. Down on Earth, the bombardment began. The Valkyrie didn't target cities at first. They destroyed military bases with precision strikes. Missile silos exploded. Naval bases were melted into slag. Air Force installations vanished under beams of energy. The message was clear. Humanity's ability to fight back was being systematically eliminated. Dr. Minji worked without sleep in the command center. She coordinated with scientists around the world, trying to find any weakness in the alien technology. The energy shield seemed impenetrable. The weapons were too powerful to counter. Their ships moved with impossible speed. Every analysis came back with the same conclusion. Earth couldn't win a conventional war. Colonel Taiyang was already planning an unconventional one. As alien dropships began landing in major cities, he moved his forces into position. They weren't where military doctrine said they should be. They weren't defending strategic locations or trying to hold ground. Instead, they disappeared into tunnels, forests, and ruins. They hid among civilian populations. They became ghosts. The Valkyrie ground forces emerged from their ships wearing armor that made them look like walking tanks. They were taller than humans, stronger, and equipped with weapons that could level buildings. They marched into cities expecting terrified crowds and quick surrender. What they found instead was eerie silence. Entire populations had vanished underground. The first Valkyrie soldiers died to roadside bombs made from mining explosives, then to sniper fire from abandoned buildings, then to ambushes in subway tunnels. The aliens had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never faced guerrilla warfare. They didn't understand an enemy that refused to fight fair. As the first week of occupation ended, the Valkyrie High Commander broadcast another message. They praised humanity's bravery, but promised swift punishment for continued resistance. They showed footage of their forces securing major cities. They declared victory. But deep in the underground facilities, Jiho repaired his ship. Minji studied captured alien technology. Taiyang trained more fighters. And across Earth, billions of humans made a collective decision. They would not surrender. They would not submit. If the Valkyrie wanted Earth, they would have to take it from the cold, dead hands of every last human. Part 2. Human Resilience. 3 months had passed since the invasion began. The Valkyrie controlled the surface of every major city on Earth. Their silver banners hung from buildings in New York, Tokyo, London, and Mumbai. They had established garrison posts and declared Earth a conquered world. Their broadcasts to the rest of the galaxy showed images of human submission and Valkyrie triumph. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. Lieutenant Hyejin Lee lay perfectly still on the roof of a collapsed apartment building. She had been in position for 6 hours, barely breathing, watching the Valkyrie patrol pattern through her scope. The aliens were predictable. They followed the same routes at the same times every day. It was a mistake born from arrogance, and Hyejin had learned to exploit every mistake the enemy made. Her target was a Valkyrie officer, distinguished by the gold markings on its armor. It walked with 3 guards, all of them scanning the ruins with their advanced sensors. But sensors couldn't detect a human who had covered herself in thermal blankets and buried herself under debris. Hyejin had learned patience during her 10 years as a competitive shooter. Now that patience was a weapon, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle was old, a simple bolt-action design that would have been outdated 50 years ago. But it worked, and it didn't have electronic components that the Valkyrie could detect. The bullet traveled nearly a kilometer before striking the officer in the gap between its helmet and chest plate. The alien dropped instantly. Before the guards could react, 3 more shots rang out from different positions. Hidden resistance fighters had coordinated their attack perfectly. 4 Valkyrie dead in 4 seconds. By the time alien reinforcements arrived, the shooters had vanished into the tunnels beneath the city. This pattern repeated across the world. The Valkyrie would send patrols, and humans would kill them from hiding. The aliens would establish checkpoints and humans would destroy them with homemade explosives. The occupiers would try to restore power to a district and humans would sabotage the generators. Every day the Velkari lost soldiers. Every day they controlled less territory than they claimed. Engineer Daehyun Choi worked in a secret facility carved into a mountain in South Korea. Around him were machines and tools salvaged from laboratories across Asia. On the table before him lay pieces of Velkari technology, fragments of armor, broken weapons, shattered shield generators. Daehyun had been studying these pieces for weeks, taking them apart molecule by molecule. The aliens had made another mistake. They assumed human science was too primitive to understand their technology. They were partially right. Human physics couldn't explain how the Velkari shields worked or how their energy weapons generated such power. But Daehyun wasn't trying to understand the physics. He was trying to copy the results. He had managed to salvage a power cell from a destroyed alien weapon. It generated more energy than a human nuclear reactor, but it fit in his palm. Daehyun connected it to a human-made weapon frame, rerouted the power flow through a series of capacitors, and added a cooling system built from air conditioning parts. The result was ugly and unstable, but when he pulled the trigger, the blast melted through a steel plate. It was humanity's first energy weapon, built from alien parts and human ingenuity. Daehyun immediately began designing a version that could be mass-produced in hidden workshops. It wouldn't be as powerful as true Velkari weapons, but it would be enough. Enough to hurt them. Enough to make them bleed. Dr. Soo-Jin Han made a different kind of discovery in a laboratory beneath Sydney. She was a biologist who had been studying samples taken from dead Velkari soldiers. The aliens were impressive specimens, stronger, faster, and more durable than humans. Their biology was efficient and optimized in ways that human evolution had never achieved. But efficiency came with a cost. The Velkari had evolved on a world with very few diseases. Their ships were sterile environments. Their immune systems were powerful but narrow, designed to fight specific threats. When Soo-Jin exposed Velkari tissue samples to common Earth bacteria, the results were shocking. The alien cells had no defense against microorganisms they had never encountered. She tested further. Common flu viruses killed Velkari cells within hours. Simple fungal infections spread through their tissue like wildfire. Even harmless Earth bacteria caused severe reactions. The Velkari's biological superiority was also their greatest weakness. They had never needed to develop immunity to the chaos of Earth's biosphere. Soo-Jin immediately shared her findings with Dr. Minji and the Defense Council. Within days, resistance fighters were coating their weapons with specific bacterial cultures. They contaminated water supplies in Velkari-occupied buildings. They released fungal spores in areas where aliens gathered. The Velkari began falling sick, and their advanced medicine couldn't identify or treat the infections fast enough. Colonel Taeyang used all these developments to escalate the resistance. He had transformed his forces from a military unit into something more dangerous, a network of guerrilla fighters who struck without warning and vanished without trace. His soldiers didn't wear uniforms anymore. They looked like civilians, refugees, survivors. They hid among the population and struck when the enemy was vulnerable. In the ruins of Seoul, Taeyang planned his most ambitious operation yet. Intelligence suggested the Velkari would move a large force through the city to establish a new command center. The aliens wanted to make a statement to show that they controlled Korea completely. Taeyang decided to make a statement of his own. He spent 2 weeks preparing the trap. His engineers placed explosives in every major building along the route. They rigged subway tunnels to collapse. They positioned fighters with Daehyun's new energy weapons on surrounding rooftops. They contaminated the area with Soo-Jin's biological agents. When the Velkari column entered Seoul, they walked into a carefully orchestrated nightmare. The first explosion brought down a skyscraper directly onto the alien convoy. The Velkari shields protected them from the debris, but the impact scattered their formation. Then the subway tunnels collapsed, dropping entire city blocks into underground caverns. Alien soldiers fell into darkness, their communications disrupted by tons of concrete and steel. Taeyang's fighters emerged from hiding. They fired energy weapons at close range, targeting the gaps in Velkari armor that Hiejin had identified. They threw biological grenades that spread contaminated material across the battlefield. They used human tactics, chaos, confusion, and violence against an enemy trained for orderly warfare. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 200 Velkari soldiers were dead or dying. The aliens lost an entire battalion in a single engagement. Their command center was never established. Instead, Seoul became a symbol of human resistance, a city that refused to be conquered. The Velkari High Commander was furious. He had never experienced significant losses before. The humans were supposed to be primitive, easy to control. Instead, they were inflicting casualties that no other species had managed. He ordered his forces to become more aggressive, to stop trying to minimize human casualties, to crush the resistance with overwhelming force. But force was not the answer to guerrilla warfare. The more aggressive the Velkari became, the more humans joined the resistance. Every bombardment of a civilian area created new fighters. Every execution of prisoners made the survivors more determined. The aliens were fighting an enemy they didn't understand, one that grew stronger through suffering. Dr. Minji coordinated the global resistance from her command center. She had created a network that connected fighters on every continent. When one group discovered a weakness in Velkari technology, every group knew within hours. When a tactic worked in Africa, it was used in Asia the next day. Humanity's greatest strength had always been communication and cooperation, and Minji had turned it into a weapon. Captain Jiho and the surviving Space Forces had retreated to a hidden base in the asteroid belt. They were repairing damaged ships and planning their next move. Jiho knew the real war would be won on Earth, but he also knew the Velkari fleet needed to be challenged. As long as the aliens controlled space, they could bring reinforcements and supplies. That had to change. As the 3rd month of occupation ended, the Velkari sent a message to their empire. They reported that Earth was under control, but required additional forces to maintain order. It was the first time they had ever requested reinforcements. The High Commander didn't admit defeat, but he no longer claimed easy victory. On Earth, humans saw the message as proof that their resistance was working. They had survived 3 months against impossible odds. They had adapted, learned, and fought back. The Velkari might control the cities, but they didn't control humanity. And every day the war continued, humans became more dangerous. In underground facilities, workshops, and hidden bases across the planet, humanity prepared for the next phase of the war. They had learned to survive. Now they would learn to strike back. Part 3, the counteroffensive. 6 months into the occupation, the tide began to turn. What the Velkari had expected to be a quick conquest had become a grinding war of attrition. Their forces were spread thin across the planet, constantly harassed by an enemy that refused to face them in open battle. Every supply convoy needed heavy guards. Every garrison post required constant reinforcement. The humans were bleeding them slowly. Captain Bora Nam had spent 4 months living in the wreckage of a Velkari dropship. The crash had killed most of the alien crew, but the ship itself was mostly intact. Bora had been a test pilot before the invasion, one of the best Korea had ever produced. Now she was teaching herself to fly alien technology through trial and error. The controls made no sense at first. The aliens had different hands, different eyes, different ways of thinking. But Bora was patient. She studied the systems piece by piece. She practiced in the simulator systems that were still functional. She made mistakes and learned from them. After 4 months, she could fly the alien ship as well as any Velkari pilot. The real breakthrough came when she realized the ship's identification codes were still valid. The Velkari computer systems didn't know this particular ship had been captured. As far as their network was concerned, it was still a loyal vessel. Bora reported her discovery to Dr. Minji, who immediately understood the implications. They could infiltrate the enemy fleet. Commander Jin Woo-yoon was brought into the planning. He had been an admiral in the South Korean Navy before the invasion, a tactical genius who had revolutionized naval warfare doctrine. Now he applied that same genius to space combat. If they could capture more ships, if they could operate inside Velkari formations, they could turn the enemy's own strength against them. The plan was audacious. Captain Jiho would lead the Defiance and the surviving human ships in an attack on a Velkari supply convoy near Mars. The attack would be obvious, loud, and seemingly desperate. While the aliens focused on defending against this frontal assault, Bora would fly her captured ship into the convoy using valid identification codes. Once inside, she would deploy teams of human soldiers who would sabotage the supply ships from within. The operation began at dawn on Earth's clock, though time meant nothing in space. Jiho's fleet emerged from behind Mars's moons, firing everything they had at the Velkari convoy. The aliens responded immediately, their superior weapons tearing into the human ships. It looked like another doomed human attack, exactly what the Velkari had come to expect. Bora's ship approached from a different angle, transmitting friendly codes and requesting permission to dock for repairs. The Velkari commander was busy with the frontal assault and approved the request without close inspection. Bora's ship slid into the convoy formation, and she docked with a massive supply vessel. 40 human soldiers poured out of Bora's ship. They wore captured Velkari armor and moved with practiced efficiency. They split into teams, each with specific targets. One group headed for the engine room. Another made for the bridge. A third team went to the cargo holds to plant explosives. They moved fast, knowing they had minutes at best before someone realized what was happening. Lieutenant Hyejin led the team to the bridge. She had traded her sniper rifle for a Velkari plasma weapon, and she used it to cut through the door controls. The bridge crew barely had time to react before Hyejin's team opened fire. The aliens were trained soldiers, but they weren't prepared for enemies appearing in the middle of their own ship. The bridge fell in seconds. Hyejin took control of the ship's weapons and turned them on the other vessels in the convoy. Energy beams meant for Jiho's fleet instead struck Velkari ships. Shields flickered and failed under friendly fire. Chaos erupted in the convoy formation as ships tried to figure out what was happening. Meanwhile, Daehyun's engineering team reached the reactor room. The Velkari power systems were still partially mysterious to human science, but Daehyun had learned enough. He didn't need to understand how the reactor worked. He just needed to make it overload. He bypassed the safety systems and pushed the power output to maximum. The reactor began to destabilize. The human teams retreated to Bora's ship, fighting through Velkari soldiers who finally understood they had been infiltrated. 3 humans died in the retreat, but the rest made it back. Bora disconnected from the supply ship and accelerated away at full speed. Behind them, the reactor went critical. The explosion was massive. The supply ship became a temporary star, its detonation catching 2 nearby vessels in the blast. The Velkari convoy broke formation, their tight military discipline shattered by the surprise attack from within. Jiho's fleet pressed the advantage, targeting the confused and damaged ships. When the battle ended, 5 Velkari ships were destroyed and 3 more were crippled. The humans had lost only 1 vessel. More importantly, they had captured intact 2 supply ships full of weapons, equipment, and most valuable of all, intelligence data. It was the first major human victory in space. Down on Earth, Colonel Taeyang was launching his own offensive. The resistance had grown from scattered fighters to an organized military force. They operated in cells, each independent but coordinated through Dr. Minji's network. Taeyang had learned the enemy's weaknesses intimately over 6 months of warfare, and now he was ready to exploit them. The target was the Velkari garrison in Mumbai. The aliens had fortified the city heavily, turning it into a major command center. They believed it was impregnable. Taeyang believed their confidence was a weakness. He had been planning this attack for 2 months, moving forces into position slowly, carefully, hiding among the massive civilian population. The attack began at midnight. Resistance fighters emerged from sewers, abandoned buildings, and hidden tunnels. They didn't attack the fortress walls or try to breach the main gates. Instead, they hit the power grid, the water supply, and the communication towers simultaneously. The Velkari base went dark and silent. In the confusion, Taeyang's elite forces scaled the walls using climbing equipment. They were few in number but highly trained. Each soldier knew their exact target. They moved through the darkened base like ghosts, killing guards silently and planting explosives on key structures. The main assault came from an unexpected direction, underground. Taeyang had spent weeks tunneling beneath the base using mining equipment. His forces emerged inside the compound, behind every defensive line the Velkari had established. The aliens suddenly found themselves fighting on all sides in darkness against an enemy who knew the terrain better than they did. The battle was brutal. The Velkari were still powerful warriors, and their weapons were superior. But they were fighting a defensive battle in conditions that favored humans. Every dark corner could hide an enemy. Every doorway could conceal an ambush. The aliens' advanced sensors were useless in the chaos. Taeyang himself led the assault on the command center. He fought with a captured Velkari weapon in one hand and a human combat knife in the other. His team cleared room after room, moving with practiced efficiency. When they reached the main command chamber, they found the base commander trying to call for orbital support. The transmission never went through. Hee-jin, who had returned from the space battle, had her rifle trained on the communications array from 3 kilometers away. She destroyed it with a single shot. The garrison was isolated, cut off from help, dying in the dark. By dawn, Mumbai was back in human hands. The Velkari garrison was destroyed. Hundreds of alien soldiers were dead and the few survivors were taken prisoner. More importantly, humans had reclaimed a major city for the first time since the invasion began. The victory was broadcast across every resistance network. The Velkari High Commander watched the reports with growing concern. The humans were no longer just resisting, they were winning. Their tactics were too unpredictable, their determination too strong. Species that had submitted after a single battle were easier to conquer than these stubborn apes from Earth. He made a decision. The Velkari would escalate. They would bring in their elite forces, their best weapons, their most experienced commanders. They would crush this rebellion before it spread to other conquered worlds. The High Commander didn't realize he was making the same mistake every conqueror before him had made, assuming that more force was the answer to guerrilla warfare. Dr. Minji analyzed the intelligence, data captured in the space battle. She discovered something crucial. The Velkari Empire was not as united as it appeared. 3 of the 4 species in the coalition were subject races, conquered worlds forced to contribute soldiers. Only the silver-skinned Velkari themselves were the masters. This information changed everything. The resistance wasn't fighting a monolithic empire. They were fighting an occupation force that included slaves. Minji immediately began crafting propaganda messages aimed at the subject species. Messages about freedom, about resistance, about how Earth refused to submit. If they could inspire those soldiers to question their masters, the entire Velkari war machine could collapse. As month 7 began, humanity stood at a turning point. They had survived the initial invasion. They had learned to fight back. They had won significant victories. The Velkari still held most of Earth, but their grip was weakening. Every day, more territory returned to human control. Every day, the cost of occupation grew higher. Part 4. The Fury Unleashed. Months after the invasion began, something fundamental changed in humanity. The change wasn't sudden. It had been building slowly, fed by every atrocity, every loss, every burned city. The Velkari had tried to break human will through terror. Instead, they had forged something harder than any metal in the galaxy. Pure, focused rage. The catalyst was the massacre at Rio. The Velkari had grown frustrated with the resistance in South America. Their commander decided to make an example. He ordered his forces to gather all civilians in a stadium. Men, women, children. The humans thought it was a processing center, a way to register the population. Instead, the Velkari opened fire. 50,000 people died in 20 minutes. The aliens broadcast footage of the massacre to every resistance cell they could find, along with a simple message. This is what happens when you resist. They believed fear would finally break the human spirit. They were catastrophically wrong. Dr. Minji watched the footage in the command center. She had seen terrible things in 9 months of war, but this was different. This wasn't combat. This wasn't soldiers fighting soldiers. This was murder, pure and simple. Around her, other council members wept or raged. She felt nothing. The shock was too deep for emotion. Then she saw Colonel Taeyang's face on the video feed. His expression was empty, cold as deep space. When he spoke, his voice was calm, which somehow made the words more terrifying. He said something that would be repeated across every resistance network within hours. No more prisoners. The United Defense Council debated for 6 hours. Some argued that executing prisoners would make humanity no better than the invaders. Others said mercy was a luxury they could no longer afford. The vote was close, but it passed. From that moment forward, Velkari forces would be offered one chance to surrender. Only one. Those who refused would be shown the same mercy they had shown at Rio. Admiral So-Min Kang led the first operation under the new doctrine. She commanded Earth's space fleet, a bizarre collection of captured alien ships, retrofitted human vessels, and experimental hybrids that barely held together. Her target was the Velkari fleet stationed at Jupiter's moon Ganymede. The aliens used Ganymede as a staging area, bringing in reinforcements and supplies before sending them to Earth. It was heavily defended, with 3 battleships and a dozen smaller craft. Under normal circumstances, attacking it would be suicide. But So-Min wasn't planning a normal attack. Dr. Yuna Shin had completed her work on Earth's secret weapon. She called it a quantum disruptor, though the name was just a label for something she barely understood herself. The device generated a field that interfered with Velkari shield technology at the quantum level. It didn't disable the shields, it made them unstable, prone to catastrophic failure. The disruptor had limitations. It was huge, requiring an entire ship to carry it. It had a range of only a few kilometers. It took 10 minutes to charge between uses, but when it worked, it turned Velkari shields from impenetrable barriers into death traps. The energy feedback could destroy a ship from within. So-Min's fleet approached Ganymede openly, broadcasting false surrender signals. The Velkari commander was suspicious, but allowed them to approach under heavy guard. When the human fleet was in range, So-Min activated the quantum disruptor. The effect was immediate and devastating. Shield generators across the Velkari fleet overloaded simultaneously. Secondary explosions rippled through their ships as power systems failed. The human fleet opened fire. Without shields, the alien vessels were vulnerable. Missiles that would have bounced off energy barriers now punched through hulls. Railgun rounds that would have been deflected now tore ships apart. Energy weapons melted through armor that was never meant to face direct fire. The battle lasted 12 minutes. All 3 Velkari battleships were destroyed. The smaller craft tried to flee, but Captain Bora's fighter squadrons hunted them down. She led her pilots with cold efficiency, targeting engines and life support systems. Every alien ship was destroyed. There were no survivors. So-Min broadcast the battle footage across every communication channel. She included a message in Velkari language. This is what happens when you massacre civilians. The galaxy watched as humanity's fury turned a superior fleet into debris. On Earth, Colonel Taeyang implemented similar tactics. His forces no longer tried to minimize casualties. When they attacked a Velkari position, they killed everyone inside. When they captured a garrison, they offered one chance for surrender. One chance. Those who refused were executed on the spot, and the executions were recorded and sent to other Velkari forces. Lieutenant Hyojin became known among the aliens as the Silent Death. She had killed over 200 Velkari soldiers in 9 months, most from distances they couldn't even imagine. Now she took contracts on specific targets, commanders, officers, anyone important. She would track them for days, learning their patterns, waiting for the perfect shot. She never missed. Daehyun's weapons had evolved beyond simple energy guns. He now produced portable versions of ship weapons, devices that required 2 people to carry but could level buildings. He created biological weapons using Sujin's research, not diseases, but targeted agents that affected only Velkari physiology. He designed explosives that could penetrate alien armor. Every week he invented new ways to kill the enemy. The Velkari began to experience something they had never felt in their centuries of conquest: fear. Their soldiers became hesitant to patrol. Their commanders refused dangerous assignments. They stopped venturing into human-controlled areas without overwhelming force. The hunters had become the hunted. The high commander of the Velkari fleet watched his empire's grip on Earth crumble. He had committed nearly a third of his total military to this one planet, and they were losing. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied logic. They accepted casualties that would break any rational species. They turned every defeat into motivation for the next battle. He made a desperate decision. He would bring the Velkari elite guard to Earth, 10,000 of the finest warriors the Empire had ever produced. They were veterans of 100 campaigns, equipped with the best weapons and armor. They had never been defeated. He would unleash them on humanity and crush this rebellion once and for all. Dr. Minji intercepted the communications about the elite guard. She analyzed their deployment plans, their equipment, their tactics. What she found was both concerning and revealing. The elite guard were undeniably powerful, but they fought with the same rigid doctrine as all Velkari forces. They were trained for conventional warfare against enemies who fought like them. She developed a strategy. Instead of meeting the elite guard in battle, humanity would simply refuse to engage on their terms. The aliens would land expecting glorious combat. Instead, they would find empty cities, abandoned bases, and silence. Then the ambushes would begin. The elite guard landed in a dozen major cities simultaneously. They deployed in perfect formations, their weapons ready, their shields at maximum. They marched through streets expecting resistance. They found nothing. The cities were empty, evacuated in advance by resistance networks. Then the bombs started going off. Not massive explosives meant to kill, smaller devices designed to wound, to create panic, to force the aliens to spread out. The elite guard broke formation to help their wounded. That's when the real attack began. Resistance fighters emerged from every direction. They struck with hit-and-run tactics, never staying in one place long enough for the aliens to concentrate fire. They used biological weapons that spread through Velkari ranks. They collapsed buildings onto enemy positions. They turned the aliens' own predictability into a weapon. In Beijing, Colonel Taiyang personally led an assault on an elite guard battalion. His forces attacked from underground tunnels, emerging in the middle of the alien formation. The battle was close range and brutal. Humans died by the dozens, but they took 3 aliens with them for every human lost. Taiyang fought at the front, his weapons firing until they overheated, then using captured alien weapons, then fighting hand-to-hand when ammunition ran out. The elite guard commander fell to a simple knife thrust from Taiyang. The alien had been scanning for threats from a distance, never imagining a human could get close enough to strike. Taiyang had crawled through debris and dead bodies for 2 hours to reach that position. When the commander fell, his battalion broke and ran. The elite guard, the undefeated warriors, ran from humans. In space, Admiral Soman pressed her advantage. Earth's fleet was now larger than the Velkari force remaining in the solar system. She hunted down every alien ship she could find. Her orders were simple: demand surrender once. If refused, destroy them. Many Velkari commanders chose to fight rather than surrender. None survived. Captain Jiho, now commanding a captured Velkari battleship, led a raid on the alien supply depot at Titan. His forces overwhelmed the defense, captured massive stockpiles of weapons and equipment, and destroyed what they couldn't carry. The Velkari forces on Earth were now cut off from resupply. By the end of the 10th month, the situation had reversed completely. The Velkari held a few fortified positions, but they were trapped, surrounded, and running low on supplies. Their elite guard had been reduced to half strength. Their fleet had retreated to the outer solar system. Part 5. Earth Ascendant 1. Year after the invasion began, humanity made a decision that shocked the galaxy. They would not simply drive the Velkari from Earth. They would follow them home. They would take the war to the alien empire itself. Some called it madness. Others called it justice. Colonel Taiyang called it necessary. The Velkari remnants on Earth had retreated to 3 heavily fortified positions, one in Australia, one in Greenland, and one in the Pacific Islands. They were waiting for evacuation ships that would never come. Admiral Soman had destroyed every rescue vessel the aliens sent. The remaining Velkari forces were trapped, cut off, slowly dying from human biological weapons that their medicine couldn't cure. General Yunji Bayek was appointed Supreme Commander of Earth's United Forces. She had been a military strategist before the invasion, teaching warfare theory at universities. Now she led the largest military operation in human history. Her plan was ambitious to the point of insanity, but the Defense Council approved it unanimously. Earth would go on the offensive. The first step was securing the solar system completely. Captain Jiho led the final assault on the Velkari fleet hiding near Neptune. The aliens had 20 ships left, enough to be dangerous if allowed to regroup. Jiho commanded 30 vessels now, a mix of captured alien technology and human innovation. The quantum disruptor had been refined, made more efficient. Each ship carried one. The battle near Neptune lasted 3 hours. The Velkari fought with desperate fury, knowing this was their last stand in the solar system. They managed to destroy 5 human ships, but it wasn't enough. The quantum disruptors made their shields useless. Human weapons, once inferior, now cut through alien armor with brutal efficiency. By the time the battle ended, the Velkari fleet was annihilated. Jiho broadcast his own message to the galaxy, using captured Velkari communication systems. He told every species in the Empire what had happened. Earth had defended itself. Earth had won. And now Earth was coming for those who had attacked them. The message was simple: surrender immediately, or face the same fate as the invasion force. On Earth, the remaining Velkari positions fell one by one. The Australian fortress was the first to go. Colonel Taeyang surrounded it with artillery and simply bombarded it for 3 days straight. When the aliens finally attempted a breakout, they ran directly into prepared killing zones. Human soldiers showed them no mercy. The battle was over in hours. The Greenland position fell to a different tactic. Dr. Sujin had developed a biological agent specifically designed to incapacitate Velkari without killing them. It spread through their ventilation systems, causing temporary paralysis. When human forces entered the base, they found over 1,000 aliens lying helpless. They were taken prisoner and transported to holding facilities. These prisoners became valuable intelligence sources. Under interrogation, they revealed the location of the Velkari homeworld, their military strength, and most importantly, the unrest among the subject species. 3 conquered races provided soldiers for the Empire, but they did so unwillingly. Many would defect if given the chance. Dr. Minji coordinated with resistance movements on the conquered worlds. Using captured Velkari communication systems, she sent messages to these subject species. She told them about Earth's victory, about how a single world had defeated the Empire's might. She offered alliance, promised support, and asked only one thing in return: rise up when Earth arrived. The final Velkari position on Earth, the Pacific Fortress, surrendered without a fight. Their commander sent a simple message. They laid down their weapons and requested mercy under the rules of warfare. It was the first time any Velkari force had surrendered. Delegate Minho Song, representing Earth's diplomatic corps, accepted the surrender and promised the soldiers would be treated according to human law. With Earth secured, the fleet prepared for the longest journey humanity had ever attempted. The Velkari homeworld was 30 light-years away. Using captured alien faster-than-light engines, the trip would take 2 months. Admiral Salmon would lead the military fleet. Captain Jiho would command the vanguard. General Yunji would coordinate the overall strategy from a command ship, and Colonel Taeyang would lead the ground forces. The fleet that left Earth was impressive. 60 warships, half of them captured Velkari vessels and half human-built ships equipped with alien technology. 30 support ships carrying supplies, weapons, and 20,000 soldiers. And 1 special vessel, a mobile research station where Dr. Yuna continued refining the quantum disruptor technology. The journey through faster-than-light space was strange. The universe outside looked wrong. Colors that didn't exist. Distances that made no sense. But the human crews adapted. They always adapted. They trained during the journey, practiced combat maneuvers, prepared for the battles ahead. They weren't alone in their journey. 3 ships from subject species joined them along the way. Deserters from the Velkari military who brought intelligence and support. They told Samin about defensive positions, military protocols, and the growing unrest on the conquered worlds. The Empire was fracturing, and Earth's arrival would be the final crack. When the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velkari home system, they found it heavily defended. Hundreds of ships, orbital platforms, planetary shields. It was the most powerful military force Earth had ever faced. General Yunji looked at the odds and smiled. The Velkari still didn't understand. Numbers didn't win wars. Will did. The attack began with psychological warfare. Dr. Minji broadcast across all channels showing footage of Earth's victory. She showed Velkari soldiers dying, fleeing, surrendering. She showed human technology matching and exceeding alien weapons. She broadcast in the languages of the subject species, calling for rebellion. And she issued an ultimatum: surrender the High Commander for war crimes, or Earth would take him by force. The Velkari response was defiant. Their defensive fleet moved to intercept. Admiral Soman met them with the full might of Earth's fury. The quantum disruptors fired simultaneously, and dozens of Velkari shields failed at once. Then Captain Bora led fighter squadrons through the gaps, targeting the disabled ships with precision strikes. The battle was chaos, beautiful and terrible. On one of the orbital platforms, a group of subject species soldiers heard Dr. Minji's message. They looked at each other, made a decision that would change galactic history, and opened fire on their Velkari overseers. The mutiny spread across the platform within minutes. They turned the station's weapons on the Velkari fleet. Similar rebellions erupted throughout the defensive network. The subject species had been waiting for a signal, for proof that the Empire could be defeated. Earth provided that proof. Within hours, half the defensive fleet was fighting itself. The Velkari found themselves battling both humans and their own former slaves. Colonel Taiyang led the ground assault on the Velkari homeworld itself. He deployed from orbit and captured dropships, landing in the capital city with 5,000 soldiers. The Velkari had never been invaded before. Their home had never known war. Taiyang intended to teach them what Earth had learned. The fighting in the capital was fierce. The Velkari defense forces were well-trained and fought desperately to protect their homeworld. But they faced an enemy that had been forged in 12 months of brutal warfare. Human soldiers moved through the alien city with practiced efficiency, using every tactic they had learned. Buildings became fortresses. Streets became kill zones. The aliens were fighting on their own ground, but humans were fighting with a year of accumulated rage. Lieutenant Hyejin provided overwatch from a captured skyscraper. She picked off Velkari commanders with casual precision. Each shot was revenge for Rio, for the millions who had died on Earth, for the children murdered in stadiums. She didn't feel satisfaction or joy. She felt nothing except the recoil of her rifle and the knowledge that justice was being served. Daehyun deployed his most devastating weapons. Not the energy guns or the bombs, but something simpler. Earth's bacteria and viruses carefully selected and cultivated. He released them into the Velkari city's air system. Within hours, the alien defenders began falling sick. Their medicine was useless against diseases they had never encountered. The mighty Velkari, who had conquered dozens of worlds, were brought low by invisible organisms. The siege of the capital lasted 3 days. In space, Admiral Soman secured complete control of orbital space. On the ground, Colonel Taiyang's forces advanced block by block toward the High Commander's palace. The Velkari government sent desperate messages to other species in the Empire, begging for help. None came. The subject species had risen in rebellion across a dozen worlds. On the 3rd day, the Velkari High Council sent an envoy to Colonel Taiyang. They requested negotiations, offered surrender, begged for mercy. Taiyang sent the envoy back with a simple message: unconditional surrender only. The High Commander must face trial for war crimes. All Velkari military forces must disarm. All conquered species must be granted independence. These were not negotiable terms. The High Council debated for 6 hours while human forces continued their advance. Finally, they made their decision. The High Commander was arrested by his own people and handed over to human custody. The Velkari fleet stood down. The empire that had ruled for centuries collapsed in a single day.